leadership challenges, I felt a growing need to shift from profit to purpose. It wasn't a sudden leap, but a quiet calling. I wanted to build something deeper, something that touched lives at their foundation. That's when I turned to education. When I founded the French section at the Lebanese International School in Kano and became its principal, I stepped into classrooms that became far more transformative than any boardroom ever had. I was no longer managing portfolios. I was nurturing potential. I was nurturing potential, young minds from different backgrounds, different cultures, who found common ground through resilience, shared learning, and curiosity. As I watched their worlds collide, clash, and ultimately connect, I realized something powerful. Education is not just a tool, it is our last true bridge. In an era defined by complexity, ambiguity, and volatility, education must evolve from being an individual passport to personal success into a collective instrument for social transformation. As our world faces cascading challenges, such as political polarization, environmental degradation, cultural alienation, and technological disruption, the role of education must transcend knowledge transfer. It must foster the ability to critically engage, empathetically connect, and boldly innovate. We need to see education not just as a personal stepping stone or a path to employment, but as a force for society's evolution and transformation. We need to replace outdated educational paradigms with dynamic, inclusive, and justice-driven models. Through insights drawn from my cross-continental teaching journey in Lebanon and Nigeria, I argue that education should be a platform of awakening. An awakening of intellect, but more crucially, an awakening of conscience. I've seen firsthand that when students internalize empathy, engage purposefully, and recognize their agency, they transition from learners to leaders, from consumers of content to creators of change. We need to move beyond passive schooling and ask, what structures are we reinforcing through our systems? And more importantly, what systems are we empowering our students to transform? The human curriculum. To teach the whole student is to address more than just their intellect. The future demands graduates who can synthesize emotional intelligence with technical competence, who can approach leadership with both analytical clarity and moral vision. The human curriculum is not a subject, it is a philosophy. It advocates integrating principles of emotional resilience, civic responsibility, cultural fluency, and ethical reasoning across disciplines. It reframes education as an act of character formation, asking students not only what they know, but who they are becoming through what they learn. I've seen the value of this firsthand when we integrated into our curriculum service-based learning. I still remember that day when we took the students on a trip to some rural areas here in Kano to help build some boreholes. On our way back to school in the bus, I still remember that young boy who looked at me and told me, "Ms. Jihane, today I feel that it's the first time we are not just learning, we are doing something that truly matters." These are not theoretical exercises. They are vital rehearsals for the decisions students will make as future leaders. Through such practical integration, we will equip the next generation not only with tools to build, but with the wisdom to build responsibly. Breaking norms in the classroom. Learning environments must disrupt tradition in order to cultivate transformation. The classroom cannot remain a neutral ground where content is deposited and evaluated. It must become a charged space of dialogue, experimentation, critical inquiry. To break norms is to dismantle the banking model of education. It is to move from memorization into meaning-making, from passive intake into active construction. It is to embrace discomfort as a site of growth and failure as a necessary pathway to innovation. Once, in our school, students challenged a unit on colonial history. And they invited parents and elders to engage in a cross-generational discussion on living memory. That dialogue changed the way we approached not only our syllabus, but each other. It reminded us that students don't just carry notebooks, they carry stories. I have witnessed powerful educational awakenings when students are allowed to co-design curricula, to investigate community-based issues, and to challenge hegemonic truths. In these moments, classrooms became laboratories of democracy, training grounds for systematic change. Building cultural bridges in a fractured world. Amid rising identity conflicts and cultural divides, education must become an architecture for connection. It must prepare students not to merely tolerate difference, but to actively seek it out and honor it. Cultural literacy is no longer optional. It is a core leadership skill. Interfaith collaboration, intercultural storytelling, and multilingual learning environments foster empathy across lines of division. Institutions should embrace these practices, not as extras, but as essentials. I've seen students in my school coming from various backgrounds, different cultures. They sit together. They exchange Ramadan recipes and Christmas greetings. They write joint essays on tolerance. They perform plays in 3 languages, French, English, and Arabic. They don't just learn about diversity, they live it. When students cross borders of identity in their academic lives, they are more likely to dismantle borders of fear and bias in society. And when education builds bridges, peace becomes not only possible, it becomes practical. The role of educators as global mentors. Educators today are stewards of humanity. We are not only teaching academic content, we are modeling what it means to navigate complexity, question ethically, and lead compassionately. To mentor in this moment is to walk beside the students as they grapple with ambiguity. It is to invite their full identity into the classroom and engage with their aspirations as seriously as we do with our syllabi. I still recall that afternoon, as I was getting out of my office, I saw a young girl sitting alone in the school garden crying quietly. I approached her and asked her what was wrong. She looked at me and said, "Ms. Jihane, I didn't get a good grade on my final exam. I feel I'm not worth for my family, for my future." Well, that day I couldn't leave her. I sat with her. I spoke with her not about test scores, but about self-worth. That moment of mentorship taught me that sometimes students do not need answers. All what they need is someone to sit with the questions. The most impactful educators I've encountered are not the loudest voices in the room. They are those who create space for risk, space for vulnerability, space for the student to emerge. In that emergence lies real education. The future we must teach from. The horizon is no longer fixed. We are educating for futures that are increasingly intersectional, non-linear, and globally intertwined. The next generation must be equipped not just to respond to but to reimagine the systems causing it. This means teaching students to decode power, to defend democratic principles, to design equitable solutions. This means nurturing change makers who see innovation not as novelty, but as necessity, rooted in justice, not just technology. Consider issues like algorithmic bias in artificial intelligence, the ethical implications of genetic engineering, or the climate crisis. Students must be prepared to face these challenges, not only with knowledge, but with the courage to intervene constructively. If our institutions do not equip students to confront the moral dilemma of tomorrow, we will have failed them today. The measure of our success will be the systems they build, the inequalities they challenge, and the futures they forge. Well, finally, in order to summarize it all, I say that the purpose of education isn't just to transmit knowledge, it is to ignite transformation. We must cultivate graduates who are not only career ready, but conscience ready, who are prepared not just to join the world, but to remake it. To my students in Lebanon and Nigeria, you are the reason I believe in this vision. Every time you've questioned, every time you've collaborated, every time you've shown up with curiosity, you've proven that the future can be different, because you are different. To borrow the words of Margaret Mead, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. So let's stop asking what the future holds. Let us start preparing those who will hold it with wisdom, with purpose, and with a radical commitment to humanity. Thank you.